Welcome to ORF Fellow Seminar. Today we have a very topical and important subject to discuss. The title of Dr. Joshi's piece is India's Post-Galwan Strategies in Managing China. We have a stellar panel with us with Professor B.R. Deepak from Center of Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies, JNU, and also Professor Alka Acharya, Director, Institute of Chinese Studies. She's not here. She'll be reaching any moment. And both of them need a little introduction given their long, illustrious career in the field of China studies. My name is Antara Ghoshal Singh, and I am a China Fellow at ORF, and I am deeply honored to be a part of this panel, and I will be chairing today's session. Well, since we have started a bit late, I'm cutting down on my opening remarks and handing over the stage to Dr. Joshi. Dr. Joshi, can you please start with your presentation?
Okay, thank you. So I think most of the people here are familiar with the developments since 2020, and in last 2 days they've been part of the news. So, but I'm not going to really venture so much into that. But let me get this underway. Okay, so this is the point was the point of this is that in dealing with this 2020 situation, India dealt with it in a special way. Meaning, yes, we've been dealing with China for a long time, but we dealt with it in a special way. It's a multifaceted strategy. Many people, obviously the opposition says that the government has been a disaster. Someone else says something else, but we are scholars. We look at what the data says and try to come up to some conclusions. Now, just to give a summary, what happened with this crisis was that it has created a trust deficit, and there was an element of complexity. China's Ladakh actions came after 27 years of stable relations. So therefore there was a bit of a shock effect out there. And it has presented a complex management challenge for India. So what India did with regard to this challenge was to adopt a balanced strategy. So India balanced military firmness with diplomatic dialogue. It maintained the strict stance, no normalization without border restoration. Right from the beginning, the attitude of the government was that there'll be no normalization. But also, as I said, there was an element of balance in it, which I will explain. Then there was, India also used the economic weapon. We utilized economic tools. For example, we banned all the apps, Chinese apps, including TikTok. Hopefully, TikTok will be back now through America. FDI screening was undertaken. Now, of course, FDI screening process began even before the crisis, but with the Chinese crisis, a lot of it was applied to the Chinese investments and technology restrictions. Then, of course, in 2024 came a breakthrough. Disengagement agreements in October 2024 successfully resolved two key, they are called friction points here. I don't really, that's what the government calls them. I call them blockade points, enabling a cautious re-engagement process. So here is the historical context. The Stabilizing Accord beginning with the Border Peace and Tranquility Accord of 1993. The 1993, the Military Agreement of 1996, the joint statement in Beijing in 2003, the 2005 political parameters and agreed guidelines of a border settlement, and the 2012 agreement on the Border Defense Cooperation Agreement. So there were a series of agreements between the two countries that built peace along the LAC and established direct military communication protocols. The interesting thing was that, despite the fact that this entire border is disputed, and not only is it disputed, where it is also disputed. Meaning there is a Chinese version of line of actual control, there is our version of the line of actual control, and there is the line of actual control. No one knows. So at the spot itself, there can be issues as to where exactly the line runs. But broadly, both sides know Let me put it that way. Both sides know where it runs, but there are places, there are 20, 25 places where there is an overlap. And when I mean by overlap is, the overlap is 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers or so. So the Chinese will say that is the LAC. We say this is the LAC. And so through agreement, we patrol this area. Through mutual agreement, we agree to patrol this. We do not construct any defensive stuff there, but we patrol this area. Now, what happened in 2020 was that well, I'll come to that. Let me first go through the post-2008 shift. 2008 is an important point of departure because that was the global financial crisis. Because we are somewhat isolated from the global finance in certain way, we don't realize the extent of the impact of the crisis in the rest of the world. In essence, what happened was that the West came down 2 notches and Chinese went up 2 notches. That was the consequence of the global financial crisis. But since in the early 2000s, we started a slow pace process of construction, border construction, trying to catch up with the Chinese. The Chinese have the advantage of geography. They have a flat terrain, so they are able to access their posts much easily. In our case, it's much more difficult. You can say a rough rule of thumb, it takes 2 days to go from the plains to the to the border itself. I'm just giving a rough rule of thumb. Otherwise, sometimes you can drive on and on and on, and it takes a long time. The other thing is that the entire border along the Himalaya is also a landslide-prone zone. So the roads keep on getting disrupted. Every monsoon they are disrupted. Every winter they are disrupted. But we started getting warning signals from 2013 onwards when there was incursions in Depsang in 2013. There was incursion in Chumar in 2014, in fact, when Xi Jinping was around. Doklam in 2017. These signaled a shift in PLA tactics. They foreshadowed the intense pressure of 2020. Now, as a result of a lot of this, India actually anticipated some of this, that with the improved communications along the LAC, etc., that we needed to do something about our force posture there. So India raised 2 new divisions between 2009 and 2011, and a Mountain Strike Corps in 2014. Mountain Strike Corps was kind of partially raised, but it was authorized, while the IAF positioned frontline fighters in the east to strengthen our deterrence. So it's not as though we were completely, we let it go. Things were happening, Both the Indians and the Chinese were playing the game. The Border Defense Cooperation Agreement of 2012, when it was being negotiated, it's the only agreement which has actually been signed by the defense people, by the way. The other agreements have been signed by diplomats. 2012 agreement was signed by Sun Jianguo, mini Admiral Sun Jianguo, who was, in the CMC, and an Indian defense secretary. And while that agreement was coming up, the Chinese said, why don't we have an agreement that we will freeze all construction on the LAC area? Now we told them, look, this thing is much more advanced, and if we freeze it, we will be in a disadvantage. So we refused that particular thing. So 2020 Ladakh crisis. So even as the COVID-19 pandemic was raging, now we often tend to forget this, the PLA initiated a series of surprising aggressive moves. So PLA blockaded 6 points, which was blockade I was explaining. So this was the area in between those. So the Chinese said, that's the border. We say, this is the border. And we used to patrol this area. So in 6 places, Chinese landed up in Ladakh and they took up positions there. And they said, you can't come in here. You can't come in here. Now, I said, traditionally, we 4 out of 5 there was mutual agreement to do that. And why do I say 4 out of 5? Because the most important place, Galwan. In Galwan, actually, the Chinese had no real claim. And why do I say this? Because in 1960, when we were doing our border discussions with each other, the Chinese gave us the latitude and longitude of what they considered was their border. And the latitude and longitude very clearly puts the confluence of the Galwan and the Shiok River out of their territory. Even their maps, war maps of 1962, show that as outside their territory. But suddenly in 2020, they come and say, no, Galwan is our part of our territory. It has always, as usual, the Chinese say, it has always been part of our territory, you see. So this Galwan area, they shouldn't have been there in the first place. So in addition, they massed about 50,000 troops. They were able to move very fast. They came down from Xinjiang and they camped there. There was no, contrary to what may suggest, this was not a kind of a war, this thing. They camped out there, they blockaded this. So this was not actually a kind of a warlike action as such. But these actions culminated in a deadly clash in Galwan Valley in June 2020, which the first fatalities in the LAC, the first set of people to die in the LAC since 1975. Now, why I say that? See, in Galwan, my own understanding is that in Galwan was a situation that went out of control. Went out of control of both sides. And the reason why I say this, if this was actually intended as a warlike thing, they wouldn't have used fists and clubs. They all had guns. No guns were used. No guns. And 20 Indians died. Allegedly 4 Chinese, some people say more have died, but so many people died, no gun was used. I think 16 of the Indians died of hypothermia because it's very cold, even in June. You see? So this I'm giving you this thing of where if you look at that PP10, PP11, PP11A, PP12, this is all part of the PP12 and PP13. That is all part of the Depsang area. And where the Chinese put the blockade wasn't near that Y junction. There is a Y junction there, I think. There, you can see the Y junction. So at the Y junction, they put the blockade, and unfortunately, the terrain is such that whether you want to go to PP10 or 11 or whether you want to go to PP13, you have to go via Y junction. So that blockade landed up there. The second place for the blockade was the Galwan Valley, which you see down here. Which you see down there, and which I said was not really, it wasn't the blockade in the sense they actually occupied a place which was under Indian control. The other was in the Kograng, this PP15. Now again, Kograng is an area where they had given us the latitude, longitude. But again, see, the problem with a lot of this is that there's a lot of things happening which neither governments tell us. Our government has not been first of all, the line of actual control is not a defined line, meaning there's no map. No one can give you a map and say this is the map of LAC. The military will have its maps, their military will have their maps, but there is no official map of the LAC. So when you say incursion, when you say blockade, you're talking a little bit. There is a little bit of confusion that arises from the fact that there is no actual accurate way of defining that. So that is the Kograng Valley here, this PP15, and then here is the Gogra out here, and I don't have the south of this is the Pangong Tso Lake. So what India did with this, after the clash in Galwan, and mind you, again the fact that both sides played it very, very cool. The clash began in the evening, it went on for a couple of hours, and then it ended, which meant that both sides had active control of their forces there. And the fact that it did not escalate beyond that. Many here are soldiers slugging it out, dying, are also equipped with guns, but yet it didn't go beyond that. That means there was effective control by both sides, political control. You can call it political control or the local command control. So now India's measured response with firmness and diplomacy. So one was this execution of an equivalent mobilization to match Chinese deployment. So India also sent in troops. But what India did was they sent as many troops as the Chinese. They didn't give any impression that we are massing forces for an attack. See, when you attack, you need about 3 times more than the defender. So it's very clear when you intend to attack. The way your army is organized, it becomes clear these are people who are out to attack or not attack. But India made it very clear there was no exclusive military response, but military deterrent posture. So we confronted the PLA forces at blockade points without escalating. Then the diplomatic and economic pressure. We said that the relations could not be normal till border situation was resolved. We engaged in a multi-level diplomatic marathon. So it was at the ministerial level, military level, and official channels. And we deployed a range of economic sanctions and investment restrictions to signal our resolve. So this was the measured response. Multi-level diplomacy. The apex level provided the strategic direction. So apex level was not Prime Minister. Apex level here was Jaishankar and Ajit Doval. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister, Ajit Doval is the NSA. The NSA is also the special representative of India's border talks with China. So they directly undertook diplomacy with Wang Yi. Now Wang Yi, for a peculiar reason, at that time was both. He was their Chinese foreign minister as well as the special representative. Okay, so basically we told them status quo ante. That's the only. Military talks were a tactical negotiation. The first time we started military talks at the senior corps commander level. And they met at the Chushul-Moldo border point, where the Chushul is, I will just show you in the map. Chushul overlooks the Pangong Tso Lake. Chushul overlooks the Pangong Tso Lake, and nearby is another lake called Spangur, and there is a Spangur gap there, and there is the Moldo point there, and from Chushul people go to the Chinese side is the Moldo, Indian side is the Chushul, and that's where talks take place at alternate levels. And the third level was the WMCC. This again is a relatively new organization, working mechanism for consultation and coordination. It's basically led by the MEA people, Joint Secretary, East Asia and all that. They lead this thing. The economic toolkit, I've already told you, investment screening. There's a so-called press note 33, number 3 of April 2020, which mandates. Now, this actually preceded this incident, but it was applied for COVID, that in COVID times, people should not try to take over Indian companies. So this was applied to the Chinese. Corporate scrutiny, tax investigations were launched into major Chinese companies. Apps were banned. I told you 350 Chinese mobile apps, TikTok, WeChat were banned. Visas for Chinese nationals were restricted. Flights were cancelled between the two countries. And for boosting the domestic industry, India started schemes like what is called the production-linked incentives, which was promoted to attract companies looking for a China plus one strategy. So these measures reduced Chinese app market share to India from 60% to near zero. You know that TikTok is hugely popular in India. Though, strangely enough, bilateral trade went up through the roof. Geopolitical shift, India started getting closer to the Quad. But that is as much India's actions as what was happening with the Quad. closer ties with the US. So in the 2000s, we signed this initiative on critical and emerging technologies, GE jet engine deal, IndusX, I2U2 grouping, India, Israel, UAE, USA grouping. So there was distinct shift in India's geopolitical steps to normality, various steps, So the various steps towards normality involved crisis management, which was in 2020, partial disengagement 2020-22, and breakthrough in 2022 and 2024. Post Galwan, as I said, Galwan was something which went out of control. In July 2020, NSA Doval spoke to his counterpart. This is July 4th, they spoke to each other, and they agreed that in Galwan we should separate by about 1.5 kilometers each. And that in between zone would be a no patrol zone. Now here is the IA counter maneuver. After this July Galwan thing, the talk started stalling. So India made its counter move. Basically, we occupied the heights. This is the line of control. You see Gurung Hill, Tabletop, Camel's Back, Spangur Gap there. Magar Hill, Mukpari, Rechinla, Rezangla. So we occupied these heights, Rechinla, Rozangla, Mukpari, Magar Hill, Blacktop and Helmet, Chinese occupied. It's in their side of the LAC. But we were very careful. We only occupied our side of the LAC. Initially, there were some rumors that we had occupied the other side, but that's not true. Now I'm just showing you a photograph from my young days. I'm overlooking in the lake that you see out there is Pangurso. So I'm on a height over Chushul. Basically, this is to give you an idea that by occupying those heights, we were able to look into Spangurso. And Spangurso is where the Chinese had all their bases. You see, here, so those red dots, they're all Chinese military positions. So when you are in the heights out here and you're overlooking that, so the Chinese were not at all happy, and that is why all those incidents which you're having now Nanavati and Naravne and this thing, all that has happened. But I'm not going to go into all that. But this is the area where this happened. Here is Rechinla and Rezangla. That is where the Rezangla is, of course, the site of the famous defense in 1962. When all the people involved died, Indian defenders were killed to the man. So now path of normalization was created. This was the zone in Galwan. In February 2021, 10-kilometer wide zone in Pangong So. So here's the Pangong So. So this zone was created. Both sides, we went there, they went there, and again, no patrol zone there. No, neither side could patrol. In July 22, 3.5-kilometer zone in Gogra and Hot Springs. But through 2023, now this is up to 2023, nothing happened. The talks on Depsang and Demchok didn't get anywhere. And the reason was that Depsang is really, in my view, the real heart of the matter. Depsang is a very important area just south of the Daulat Beg Oldi, and it's a large area. It is about 972 square kilometers. I showed you earlier PP10, PP11 and all that. That Depsang area is something which I think the Chinese really were out to establish their control on that. They had 2013 also, they had done this, and again they did this. So now, 23, nothing happened. In 24, Jaishankar and Wang Yi met twice in July in Vientiane, and they spoke of expediting issues. Doval and Wang Yi met again in September. WMCC met in July and August, and the Corps commanders also met in October. So after a 2-year stalemate, a series of high-level diplomatic engagements in 2024, which I've just described to you, on October 21, we announced the patrolling arrangements had been restored. In Depsang and Charding Nala, new mechanism to coordinate patrols to prevent face-offs. So you can see that eventually an agreement was now reached in disengagement. Crucially, the engagement included the restoration of Indian patrolling rights in Depsang and in Demchok. The other no patrol zones remain. Those are things which have to still be done. The border breakthrough unlocked a carefully curated process. So first there was a leadership dialogue. So the Prime Minister met his counterpart. Prime Minister met Xi Jinping in Kazan in Russia in October 24. And this was the first meeting since July 2018. And then he met at the SCO summit last August. Mechanisms were revived. Special representatives had not met. That was revived. Agreements were made to resume direct flights, expand tourism, pilgrimage, Kailash Mansarovar, etc. So the practical outcomes and steps forward, so I've explained to you. So we get back to border trade and that kind of stuff. And the Prime Minister and the Xi Jinping also instructed the special representative to go ahead with the border talks. But border talks have been going on since 2003. These are the key milestones which I've described to you. There was a price, of course, we paid the military casualties. There was an economic impact of reduced Chinese FDI, erosion of trust. Biggest was the erosion of trust between the two countries. And the future flashpoints remain: unsettled border, geopolitical rivalry remains, economic imbalance, India's large trade deficit with China remains. This is the economic imbalance. I'm not going to. So we are eventually, India's handling of the 2020 crisis demonstrates its effort toward the strategy of managed strategic competition and associated guardrails. The future relationship depends on maintaining a delicate balance between deterrence and dialogue. What is needed is sustained economic growth, that's the top of the triangle, diplomatic guardrail, that's the yellow part of the triangle, and effective military, underlying it is effective military deterrence. Key takeaway, while recent moves signal a pragmatic intent to stabilize ties, there is deep mistrust and strategic competition remain. So I just wanted to refer to this paper. PD Nitya, the SP of Superintendent of Police of Leh in January 23, basically this is to show how the Indian Army and the Indian security forces had been somewhat lax. She said that patrolling by Indian forces, there has been no patrolling in as many as 26 out of 65 patrolling points in 23. And China had occupied positions where there were no, as I told you, with this LAC is a big problem. But in any case, I won't go into the Nitya thing. By chance, the paper got put on the internet. It was not meant to be put on the internet. But we have got to know that there was substantial problems from the Indian side as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for the very comprehensive presentation. I'll now request Professor Deepak to make his comments.
Thank you, Antara. Happy to be here in ORF to be one of the discussants of Manoj's excellent paper. I think is rigorous strategic analysis, devoid of any, I would say, alarmist approaches, which he always avoids, and also devoid of any complacency, which I think is very, very clear from his paper. And I think he situated the crisis within the broader shift, so which we have been talking about. And I frame it between like disequilibrium and equilibrium. To start with the equilibrium, and then disequilibrium, and then intervening happenings or unfolding, which Manoj enunciated. Since I don't have much time, so I'll flag out 4 things in my discussion. So one, of course, from the equilibrium to disequilibrium, how it happened, which Manoj stated, very, very clearly with maps and slides. And the second, the countermeasures. And the third one, strategic recalibration after 24. And finally, the fallout. So these 4 points, maybe I'll take 1 or 2 minutes for each and then conclude. I think as far as equilibrium to disequilibrium is concerned, Manoj, categorically states, and the watershed is 2008 financial crisis. Before that, the signals were being emitted, Chinese, that we have risen up, and your GDP is nowhere, near us, and the push, especially along the line of actual control, blurred, building of infrastructure and so on and so forth, it was already happening. And the Chumar was the first thing, 2014. In fact, 13 during Li Keqiang's visit, there were also problems. Depsang, yeah. And then ultimately, Doklam and finally Galwan. I think by framing the crisis at the transition from equilibrium to disequilibrium, Manoj, he departs from the narratives that attribute Galwan primarily to misperceptions or localized escalations, as it happened, before. I think some of the instances of, say, Depsang, Chumar earlier, so they were, pronounced as localized problems at commanders' levels. But I think he departs from that as far as Galwan is concerned. So instead suggest intent the structural ambition of China's part, and primarily, pushing the LAC, or taking rather advantage of the blurred LAC, especially, you can say, the territory west of the Y junction, which Manoj didn't elaborate. It is around 68 square kilometer area to the estuary of Ashok and Galwan, right? So this area, so they wish to push India out of this and extend their line of actual control, to this area. And similar things, so they are doing in the Galwan area, so which Manoj has beautifully, expounded in his books, India-China Border. So which China Report has also, published the review. It's a nice book. I think some of the things which he has elaborated, so they are all, here with beautiful maps which he has created. And I think all of you should be reading the book, India-China Border. If you have not, please do it. And some of the things which I will be doing is also my inputs, from the Chinese sources, since I know Chinese, and I've also published a recent study in 2 volumes, Rising India and China, Strategic Rivalry in the Himalayas and the Indo-Pacific. So many of the things which I've taken from the Chinese sources out there. And I think, as far as Manoj's assertion that the Chinese argument about petroleum point 14, so that is the Galwan, Galwan. So I think he's right, and the maps the Chinese produces, and even exchanged, as far as the Western sector maps, when these were exchanged for the first time, it was not stated that. So for China, there, is of course at fault, and then would like to push their territorial claims, further. But of course, the Chinese, if I see their viewpoints, so they are trying to balance it out with our position in eastern sector, especially in Yangtze area. And the argument is that, so if we are doing this in here, India is doing the similar thing in Yangtze area. And the area, interestingly involved in Yangtze, it is also similar, around 60 plus kilometers, or 63, 64 kilometers. And we have crossed McMahon line in Yangtze, according to the Chinese. They have published maps also. And we have occupied those vantage positions. And one of the arguments the Chinese have given are rather saying that settling to reach the border agreement, a patrolling agreement, is exactly that point, that they have got access, which Manoj has also pointed out in his paper, in these areas, of course, in tandem with the Indian security forces. And similar thing has happened in Depsa, as far as our patrolling is concerned. And the matching, I think I will not go into the details. It was a tedious negotiation. Manoj has referred to WMCC corps commanders. 17 rounds of talks were held at corps commander level, 21 at WMCC, and then finally we have reached this so-called patrolling arrangement in 2024 during Prime Minister's visit to Kazan. I think what interests me here when he's talking about the countermeasures, I will not go through all, but take just only one. And then he is equally skeptical of those, the countermeasures, especially the non-military response, particularly. For example, this promotion of production-linked incentives, PLIs, and also China plus one. We were gung-ho about this. This will invite a lot of investment, if not Chinese, then Western countries, Americans, Europeans. But this didn't happen. And I think Manoj is, that's why I'm saying that he's quite realistic out there and skeptic about the effectiveness of this strategy. I think it still has not yielded the way we wanted it to. And the Chinese, they were very clear about it from the very beginning. And if you see the study conducted by Tang Li and one of his associates, Luo of Sichuan University, and then it is very, very clear. So they say that it will not work, for obvious reasons, because China has dominated supply chains. It has, you can say, accounted for almost, 1/3 of the global manufacturing output, which they have pointed out. And they have diversified their trade with almost 150 countries. And according to their assessment, in short and medium run, no country, forget about India, even United States, they won't be able to do away without Chinese supply chains. They're very, very clear. And India, they don't consider a serious player, to be very frank, as far as de-Sinicization or deglobalization is concerned. So it is well there in study, but unfortunately the document is in Chinese. And strategic recalibration in 2024, I think there are various external agencies there. Trump, of course, is obvious factor. His policies, perhaps Manoj didn't focus on that in his paper. And internal, of course, factors, business lobby in India, economic surveys, so they have been pointed out by Manoj quite eloquently in his study. Finally, I think a few words about the fallout. This, again, I think what he has talked about is in line with what the Chinese scholars they have talked about. For example, Fudan University Professor Tang Chiatung. So he has flagged out similar points. The widening trust deficit he's talking about, the economic losses. So he's talking about, and on top of that, perhaps fatigue of the troops, which perhaps has not happened from the Chinese side, but we have reinforced it time and again from our perspective, even though we are into the 6th year, but de-escalation, so which wanted to happen has not happened. And I think the Chinese, they want us to accept this new modus vivendi. And in 2024 statement, if you read between the lines, they have prevailed on their side and we have prevailed on our side. So we have said that peace and tranquility is must as far as the border is concerned. And they have reiterated that we should be putting the border problem in a proper position of the overall relations of, bilateral relations. So I think these are very, very clear things. And I think Chinese, so they would continue to, go ahead with the new modus vivendi. I think one thing I will share with you is that perhaps, I don't know how much truth is there in this statement. This is shared by the top echelons of Indian Army when I was conducting a workshop for the 14th Corps in Leh early last year. According to people on the ground, they shared that we had almost concluded the agreement the way we concluded in 2013, 2014, but it was for the language problem, that the issue got deteriorated and it is what it was later in. But I don't know how much truth is there. And I think the pyramid he showed, that is the 4th point, which I think it is very, very pertinent, very important, and I hope the Indian government, so they are taking these steps, without a robust economic growth trajectory. I don't think, we would be able to put a serious deterrent, to the Chinese threat with these things. Thank you very much. And I think I've taken a little more. Apologize for that.
Thank you so much, Professor. You very convincingly, argued about how equilibrium to disequilibrium should be the framework to look at the Galwan crisis. So we'll talk about it more. But before that, let me request Professor Acharya to make her comments.
Thank you, Antara, and good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Indeed, very grateful to ORF for inviting me to comment on a paper which is a bit outside my focus of interest, in the sense that the detailed military ops and the detailed military positioning and so on is not something that I get into. And as you very rightly said, our problem is that we are hamstrung by lack of information. We just don't have sufficient information to take any kind of informed assessment of what actually is happening. And then we bring in all these conflicting views, especially from very authoritative people who put in assessments which suddenly have you at odds as to exactly what happened. So I'm not going to get into that, but speak to where I am most comfortable, which is to put Galwan in an overall political perspective of Sino-Indian relations and try and see what does Galwan mean for this for this relationship going forward. Now, just before that, I would like to just a very personal note here that I was very conflicted. I had already agreed to come for this, but I really wanted to be at the IIC today, where they are having a small gathering in memory of Mr. A.S. Bhasin. Those who are working on India and China will immediately find an echo in their hearts. And I would here like to pay tribute to this gentleman whom I knew very well for the kind of yeoman service that he has done in providing documents from 47 right up to 2000 in a meticulously organized 5-volume set. And that's really something that all of you who are working on India-China should look at. Okay, now with that, let me just quickly make a few points about this paper. Number one, it's really as an account of the evolution of a dispute, a clash, and its resolution. It's really admirable because it puts things in perspective. It goes step by step in a very methodical fashion. And I must confess that I learned a lot, purely in terms of the way in which he had organized the way, the different aspects of how this built up. Now, what really are two questions that I would like to put before, because essentially this is not so much as taking out issues from your paper, but as I said, I'm going to try and put it in a different context. But one question that does occur to me, which as I read this paper, was that you make this point about how, despite the fact that this was one of the most unusual kind of border incidents in a long while, because for the first time we had casualties. After more than 3 decades of a quiescent border, we had fatalities on the border. And it was something that went out of control, quote unquote. And yet we do not see its escalation beyond a point. So the question really that occurs to me is that if it went out of control, it was yet being controlled in the sense that it was not allowed to escalate beyond a point. And my question, like that faced Sherlock Holmes, why didn't the dog bark in the nighttime, is why didn't it escalate further? What prevented this escalation, given the fact that this was completely unexpected, completely out of very surprising kind of a thing? So that's that. And throughout this long, tortuous period of consultation, discussion, meetings, exchanges, throughout this period, we see a very definite assertion of political control on that process. It was not allowed to go out of hand. That dispute did not escalate, that despite the fact that there were serious differences, it was yet kept in check, and the torturous negotiations went on and on and on for 3 years. And then it was only, I think, Operation Snow Leopard, was it, that there was an attempt by India to get a little bit of the upper hand, which, as you yourself have said, that it did play a certain kind of a role in terms of bringing the Chinese back to the negotiating table. So there were very interesting dynamics going on in this particular episode of the boundary clash. Now, so this is the first question. The second question is going to come towards the end, but I'll flag it here, which is directly related to your conclusion that we are now looking at managed strategic competition. That Galwan has really, given the fact that we did what we did, we have looked at the political, the economic, and all other aspects. We have come to the conclusion that this has to be a managed strategic competition. Now, this, because it comes out of Galwan, it comes out of a border conflict. My question is, how do you see the boundary dispute in terms of its centrality to the overall relationship? Because that is what is going to determine what is going to be the nature of this managed strategic competition. Is it that the boundary is not a part of that critical strategic competition, that it is in check, it is managed, it is, we say, managing the relationship, and therefore we look at the larger bigger picture where the strategic competition is unfolding. So to what extent does the boundary actually play a role in this emerging strategic competition? And I ask this question because right from the time that Rajiv Gandhi visits, it is agreed that they put the boundary on the back burner, that we improve the relationship in other aspects, and then we go from there to Vajpayee's visit, to 2003, to 2005, to that famous political parameters and principles. All that was predicated on the fact that we could reach an agreement keeping the boundary stable. And all this while we've been having intrusions, incursions galore. And yet that larger perspective of equilibrium and management of a stable border has stayed. But Galwan shattered that. So the question now arises is that what then becomes the template for our approach to the boundary? Because what Galwan did in no uncertain measure was shatter our complacency about managing the border in perpetuity. That eventually this question of how to settle it has to come right to the table. Otherwise, we are looking at this continued management in now a situation which is clearly not quite in India's favor in terms of the balance of forces on this boundary. So how do we then look at this question of management? How do we keep a border stable and manage strategic competition? I think that is the larger question that we have to look at. And in that, obviously, we are not helped by the fact that the dynamics of the international order are completely upending our complacencies. So look at what happens with now. I think the question before the world is not how to manage China, but how to manage the US, and how the US has succeeded in completely upending everybody's calculations in terms of their political, economic, and strategic challenges and opportunities. So and I'm putting this point here because a lot of arguments are coming out that it is because of the US that now India is forced to look at China in a different way. So this strategic competition at a time when the role of the United States is no longer the way in which we had visualized it to be playing a role in our relationship is not going to happen. The next issue that I want to raise here is that mistrust that is now leavening this entire picture is something that we need to deconstruct. It's not as if this mistrust has come all of a sudden. It's been there from 62. One can argue it never went away. It was to a certain extent, it went to the back burner, if you will, in terms of the agreements and the happy state of affairs that came about in the relationship post 2000, when the trade simply galloped. But it never really went away. And this mistrust is, to a certain extent, you see the literature is talking about mistrust stemming from perceptions of each other, how China views India, how India views China, and that that we don't trust each other. Now, I would submit to you that in the context of this interesting argument, which I'm not really convinced about equilibrium to disequilibrium, frankly, but let us say that if we look at this frame, then this question of perception becomes more interesting, because it's not just about our perceptions of China and China's perceptions of us, but our self-perception as well. From the turn of the century, to a little extent, but certainly over the last 10 years, we see a very different kind of India and a different kind of China with very different self-perceptions emerging on the stage. You referred to the fact that China, doesn't take us very seriously. They have, not a very healthy assessment of where we are or what we are all about. And this is borne out by a lot of writings from the Chinese. India, in turn, has its own self-image of being a world leader, of being a country with the fastest economy, and certainly not likely to, play second fiddle to China or be a junior partner in this whole region. Now, this perception and self-perception is clearly driving a lot of the discourse. And I think we need to factor this in, because where it becomes a complication is in our understanding of each other. My main argument over the years has been that we lack understanding of each other to a very drastic degree. And this comes back, now I think I should end over here, that I would like to come to this last point about how the managed strategic competition is going to play out at different levels. Now, Galwan has essentially given us a certain kind of confidence in our ability to continue with this dialogue with the Chinese and hold our ground and actually push for our claims and so on. So that's at the bilateral level. But then how does the strategic competition, I mean, look at what was the reaction to Galwan from our neighbors. Silence. Nobody came out to say that the Chinese had, done something wrong. Or take at the global level. Who were the countries who actually intervened in any way on either side? I mean, most tried to keep quiet about it, but not many people came out and stood with India, critiquing the Chinese. So this point about how the strategic competition will play, and let's face it, at the regional level, this strategic competition is all about power and sphere of influence. And how is that working out? I don't have time, otherwise I would have liked to spell that out as well. So with the very uncertain global level dynamics coming out, with highly complex forces shaping regional dynamics, and with this added problem of misperception at the bilateral level, my worry is that this round of trying to get past Galwan and reach a stage of managed equilibrium is not likely to last long. I'm being a bit pessimistic, but my fear is that the channels of communication, the instruments of diplomacy, the role of the people in this whole process is very, very lacking in a comprehensive approach. Apart from the official channels, you tell me which are the unofficial channels that are operating at the level of scholars, at the level of groups of invested people. Nothing. People-to-people contact is minimal. So in that kind of a context, how does one increase our understanding and awareness about the challenge? And let's have no illusions about the fact that this is our primary challenge. And we need to understand this challenge in a very comprehensive and holistic fashion before we can devise. The fact is that today everybody is saying back to square one as far as economy is concerned. Why? How? So somewhere I think we need to be very clear about what is our strategic picture going ahead. And that the problem with dealing with China has been mired in a very short-term tactical kind of a way that has not really helped in getting out of this impasse. So I will stop there thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the great presentation. Ma'am has rightly highlighted about the issue of perception and misperception in China-India relations and the need to build more understanding of each other. That's actually something that I think all China scholars look forward to. But yes, I'll open the floor for question and answers. But before that, being the moderator, let me just start with my question and then we can open up the floor. So my question to you, Dr. Joshi, you mentioned in your piece about India having realized the importance of settling the border, but China has little interest in doing so. But do you think, is there a chance of India to convince China to relook at its strategy, maybe through some incentive, maybe like, having greater access to Indian market, ensuring greater access to Indian market. China is a trading nation. It is having problems at various with various countries, like its markets are gradually closing. So is there a chance, can we open up a bit more and induce China to have better ties with us? Or like, you think we should have a more hardened stance, and we can argue that China is facing a lot of internal external challenges. Its economy is facing a lot of challenges. Its population is going down. Do you think like 10 to 20 years from here, we will be in a better position to shape the discourse on India-China border? We should wait out and we should have a more hardened stance towards China. How do you think we should approach, and how do you think we should, make China relook at its strategy towards India? So that's from my end.
I just wanted to, to reply to questions from this side
Sure.
of this thing. I'll do it very quickly. The question is about the issue of control. The first question you asked, about the control of the situation. I would say that the best statement would be if you look at all this recent Naravne controversy. What do you see? The general is saying that I asked so-and-so, then that so-and-so asked so-and-so, then so-and-so asked so-and-so. So that means the very fact that the chief of the Indian army had to wait for someone in Delhi to authorize firing means that there is a protocol in place out there. That is that the army, which the army people are very careful about, that they just don't go around shooting this thing. That they don't use weapons. That's why this was the level of control was quite striking. The fact that I told you that there are 20, there were hundreds of guys slugging it out in the dark of the night in next to the Galwan river, and out of that 14, 15, 20, 30 had died, and yet no one used a weapon, which is quite striking, which I find quite striking. So I think there is a protocol built in, and the protocol seems to be quite strictly observed. So it's only after those protocols failed that one, and that was also fired as a warning shot. That is also fired as a warning shot. There were some shots fired once in Sundarong-chu, but that is also over the heads of the Chinese patrol, not this thing. So I said there is a control, at least from the Indian side, we know. I presume a similar thing is there on the Chinese side. The managed strategies of competition, what is the centrality of the boundary dispute? I think the boundary dispute is very important. If you recollect last year, Mr. Rajnath Singh had gone to China. And he actually told his counterpart bluntly that it's time we settle the boundary dispute. Now, which is quite unique because normally Indian leaders don't say this. You see, because there is a separate process on, which is the special representative process. You see, but Rajnath Singh actually said that maybe it's time that we settle this dispute. And the two leaders, Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi, after their talks in Tianjin, they instructed the special representatives to take up this border thing more intensely. So there is a feeling on both sides. See, because both sides are now heavily building up. China has been building up forces in Tibet. We are building up on our side. And I think there has to be some understanding because my view is that no major war is possible there. In that mountain terrain, major war, I'm very careful, skirmishes, yes. Major war is not possible given the logistics of the situation. Let's assume China breaks through from Bumla and starts coming down. The mountains are such that one artillery gun can bring the road down. Likewise, the other way around, if we are going into China, the logistics of the Himalaya is quite daunting. You just can't go wherever you want. So what I'm saying is that given those circumstances, I think neither side is going to prevail in any kind of a major war across the Himalayas. That's simply not doable, in my view. What happened in 62 happened in 62. There were special circumstances for it, but I don't think currently that is any more possible. There's sufficient deterrent capacity on our side. We have very strong defenses on our side, but and I presume the Chinese have pretty strong defenses on their side. So I think once this understanding is there, there's this boundary. You look at the boundary in 1950. The boundary between the two countries was boundary between two new republics who had just taken power. The Indian Republic, 1950, the Chinese People's Republic in 1949. They were dealing with imperial maps. No one knew where the border was at that time. So the initial phase was that where is the border, and the Chinese occupying what they considered was a strategic border, and India insisting that the border is a legal border based on the British maps. So initially it was all about maps and claims and all that. Today, the border is really about dominance. Today, the Chinese use the border to establish their dominance over India. Wherever these incidents happen, and all these incidents that have happened, their aim has been dominance. Everyone knows where the border is. The issue is what use you're making of the border. So I think at some point when China realizes that can no longer happen, I think we can move to a settlement. Third thing is and template between you and me. I don't see two nuclear-armed countries exchanging large territories. I see the settlement of the border largely as an as-is, where-is process. People will, and this has been, if you look at the 2005 agreement on political parameters, agreed guidelines of political settlement, it essentially says what I'm saying, that it will be an as-is, where-is settlement. The question of mistrust has been there. In the Galwan thing, the very interesting thing is that it's not only the Chinese who played it down, even we played it down. After all, don't forget the Prime Minister said कि कुछ नहीं हुआ उधर, ना कोई घुसा, ना कोई आया. That is the exact statement I can get for you. So we also played it down. We also played it down with the fact that something like 150 Indians were captured by the Chinese. No one knows. No one here knows that so many people were captured and that they were released within 3 days. The last batch was released on the third day. 4 officers and men. That story made it to New York Times. The last batch of officers were released. But 100 to 150 people were captured. This is something which is but yet complete silence. No one, neither have we. The Chinese have put out the pictures in the internet because they have the pictures. The Chinese have put out the internet. These are unsourced pictures in the internet.
You are very poor in this PR.
Pardon?
You are very poor in this PR. That is the problem. Why these 150 people were released? Has anyone thought about it? Why 150 people were released?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Why were they released?
I'm telling you why they were released. That they were released because both sides had an interest in playing down the whole thing.
Because we had their commanding officer with us.
Oh, the commanding officer was dead.
We released him, and in the bargain, we got our boys back.
No, he died. This thing. No. I don't think that this thing. I think basically the broad thesis which I'm offering. I know. I take
There
your
were PWs on either side,
So what I'm saying is
and
that
we had very high-ranking officials of theirs.
see that would be a colonel at the most, senior colonel. Okay, but there were also 4 majors, 2 or 3 majors and a captain from our side. So it was not that though they were not this thing. The point is not that. The central point is that both sides wanted to play down the whole thing. That once this thing had happened, there was no interest on either side in playing it up. That is the point I'm trying to make. Because initially the Chinese wanted to make a tamasha of the release. So they said that we will do the release in Moldo. The thing happened in Galwan. So they said, we'll do the release ceremony in Moldo, but we refused. But then they were quietly released there itself in Galwan. So that is this thing. Your issue on the question, how do we look forward? I think there's no doubt. I think what is happening right now is a kind of a geopolitical tussle. Geopolitical and geo-economic tussle. Now in this, look, the Chinese GDP is 17 trillion. Ours is 20 trillion. Okay, ours is 4 trillion. It makes a difference. Now, yes, we are poised to grow fast. But you need to not only grow fast, you need to grow fast for 2 decades. You need to be at 10, 11% for 2 decades. That makes, people only take you serious. Do you think Trump takes us seriously? I don't think so. We don't come in his major calculation. Even this Pax Silica that they have made, this critical minerals group, initially they didn't have us there. It is only when this ambassador went, the Sergio Gore went, then they put us in that group. So what I'm trying to say is that the critical thing for India is now, and I think the Indian leadership knows it. Between you and me, I'm no particular admirer of the Indian leadership, but I think if you look at their economic policy in this thing, if you look at the recent budgets, they are boring, but boring is good. Meaning they are not, you don't want exciting budgets. You want boring budgets and get on with the process of economic transformation. Unless and until there is an economic transformation of this country, the point is you will not be, see the military part of it, there's a limit. You have nuclear weapons, so there is a limit. No one can do much to you. Beyond a point, no one can do much to you. Even the United States cannot do much to you. So what I'm saying is you have nuclear weapons, you have a 1 million plus army, you have a strong navy, you have a strong air force. So that's not the issue. The issue is the competition, the geo-economic part of the competition. And I think unless the geo-economic part of the competition gets underway, the Chinese are not going to take you seriously. Now the thing is, things are shifting. Because of the United States, the Chinese also want to be good to nice to you. Chinese also realize, because they have also been very clever in this in the iPhone business. They stopped engineers from going to India because they said they will help every move will be watched. There's a calculation at every step. In we are living in an era where it is each country for itself. And I think Mr. Trump kind of exemplifies this when he says America first. And he says, I'm for America, anything. So he's trying to get everything for America. So likewise, we will have to adopt a strategy where you say everything for India. And once you do that, you can begin moving. But if you expect that will happen tomorrow, no. It'll take time. And you're right about the demographic challenge that the Chinese face. They have a serious debt crisis. They have the consumption economy is simply not taking off. The dual circulation business is not happening. They have serious economic problems. But the thing is that I find that their leadership qualities of their average kind of political leader, the CPC leader, is high quality. I'm not so sure about ours. We often see ministers who are busy with all kinds of other stuff, who are focusing not on their subject, I would say, and who probably have no knowledge of their subject. But that is our system. Our system is like that. It is bureaucratized to some extent.
My name is Ravi Bothalingam. First of all, let me congratulate you, Manoj, on a very, very fine paper, fine presentation, and excellent inputs by both the panelists. So my question is this, that I think both you, Manoj, and Deepak, at the end of your respective presentations, agreed that the economy is the vital question. And the future of Sino-Indian relations will depend on how our economy grows and its relationship with the global economy and the Chinese economy. So the pointed thought that occurs to me is this. As you said, the PLI experience and the so-called China plus one experience seems to have shown us that for us to try and achieve high economic growth whilst trying to restrain our engagement with China is something that is not practical. In other words, the kind of riddle or dilemma is that for our rapid growth, we have to have competition as well as cooperation with China and manage that. It has to be not just a managed competition, but a managed cooperation and competition, which will enable our own economic growth. China did this in the years 1979 onwards to 2020, of course, in a very different context with America. So how adroit are we in doing this? Will we engage in economic cooperation with China in a wholehearted manner, or will it be conditional with ifs and buts and limits, and which our bureaucracy loves to do? Because as we see in these last 5 years post Galwan, China has in fact expanded its lead. It is leader in many technologies. Many of those technologies, say in the green energy, green mobility, are very relevant to us and indeed the world. So how will we manage this adroitness and grasp the nettle on the economic front as well? That's my question.
Oh, sir, can we take
Yeah,
a
sure.
few more questions? Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Rahul. My question is, what your perspective on the effectiveness of India's post-Galwan policy response in dealing with Chinese aggression?
Hello. Yeah. Hi, this is Abhinav Jha, Central University of Gujarat. Yeah, sir, I just want to, given the recent reports about, corruption in the Chinese army and also about their missiles allegedly being filled with water instead of fuel, things like that. How seriously should we really take China? I mean, that the technological or the, armament kind of edge that we see or we think they have, how seriously should we really, is it really there, or is it just a matter of perception building, something like that? Thank you.
I'm Group Captain Srinivasan. I just want to make a point about the use of weapons or rather the non-use of weapons in the Galwan clash. So apparently there are two confidence building agreements, one in 96 and one in 2005, where both sides agreed not to use firearms in case of these kind of face-to-face clashes. So that was probably one of the primary reasons we didn't see the use of weapons in the in the Galwan clash, and all kinds of caveman-like weapons were used in those clashes. And also apparently after that, this thing has been revised from our side, where firearms can be used if the emergent situation demands it. That's the point I wanted to make.
So I think, what you said about how to handle this, I think definitely the issue is, one is the economic survey of 2024. There was a portion which brought out, which I think Anand Nageshwaran must have drafted, saying that we need to either get Chinese FDI or we need to get involved in Chinese supply chains. Meaning he has given, concrete suggestions have been given by the economic advisor, chief economic advisor to the government, but nothing has really happened on that. I think the problem is that people are worried about the political fallout of that. Because after all, the rhetoric, is often very high. But yes, what Anand Nageshwaran said is correct. We need, China is one of the large, next to the United States, China is the largest FDI exporting country. And I've often asked, what if China is told to build a super highway from Chennai to Kolkata? Will it be such a disaster? It's not in any particularly strategic area. If they build it, they can't take the highway along with them. You see? So what I'm trying to say is that India's handling of China has to be more strategic. It has to be more strategic. You pick and choose the areas. Chinese did the same. The Chinese did this to various companies. They invited them in, and they told them that if you come in, you give us the technology, you know. And in many cases, in the case of railways, Chinese used to be behind us in railways technology in 1990. Okay? But today, Chinese have 50,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. In our case, we are just announcing high-speed rail is going to come. That one day, Bharat, train is a fraud because it's just a nicely designed engine. It looks nice, but the speeds of the trains are the same as they were in 1980. So we have not got a high-speed train because for high-speed train, you require special track, meaning you'll have to completely have a new track for that. It requires investment. We are doing it for the Ahmedabad-Mumbai thing with the Japanese. But we need to multiply that many times. So you need the FDI. You need money. The Chinese are very clever. They got the FDI from Japan between 1980 and 1995. You see, China is the largest recipient of Japanese FDI, or Overseas Development Assistance, ODI. So I'm saying that there is someone planning that strategy, strategizing, getting things done. The quality of leadership, to me, is very important. And I find that we are lacking in quality of leadership. We have a quality of leadership that is good in putting things across in TV, but they don't, when it comes to their own ministries, there is very little happening. Very little substantial happening. And then our problem, we have different issues with us. For example, we have promoted social welfare as a policy in various states of India, where, let's say, 10,000 rupees given to women across Bihar. That amounts to a huge amount of money. If that amount of money was utilized for certain projects in Bihar, it would have had a different consequence. But the point is, in our country, elections are also important. We are a democratic country. So this is this thing. The other thing is, what is the post-Galwan strategy? I think my own view has been that our Galwan strategy has been quite rational and effective. The very fact that we were able to get the Chinese to go back to the pre-April 2020 position in Depsang. Depsang was very important from my point of view. That since we are now again patrolling in the Depsang area, we are again patrolling in the Charding Ninglung Nala. Of course, there was no patrol zones there, but no patrol zones affect them and us in a similar manner. So the non-use of weapons, I agree with you that is this thing. But my problem is that you're fighting at night, you're desperate. Meaning, don't tell me that the soldiers will say that, both the 1996 ki agreement let us not do anything. That's not the thing. I think it was just that the protocols had been so deeply drilled into these soldiers that even that did not, of course, there was also chaos and confusion. I think you would not have known who you're firing at and who you're shooting at, given the circumstances out there.
I think quickly to respond to Ravi's question, I think I remain very, very pessimistic about Chinese investment in this country, primarily because of two reasons. One, of course, their researchers, they have been openly writing nowadays that we should not be propping up India or India's manufacturing capabilities the way Americans, Europeans, or Japanese, they have catapulted their manufacturing capabilities. So that is one reason, and create a monster the way they have created China as a challenger to their hegemony. So that is one. And I think another thing is even the relocation of Chinese industries away from China in Southeast Asian countries and others. So they are also being considered as half losses, for the Chinese. So therefore, as far as India is concerned, I think we have to introspect and overall our own state capacities and build those capacities first. And I think we have seriously not built the capacity the way the Chinese have built the capacity. And until we don't do that, I don't see we are competing with China or overcoming that gap anytime sooner. Thank you.
I think, sir, our CEA also highlighted this point a few days back. Our CEA also highlighted this fact a few days back that Chinese might not be so interested or so keen in investing in India's infrastructure or India's, manufacturing. So that is one point we need to take into consideration while talking about re-engaging with China. So with that, we have come to the end of the session. I know there are many questions left. We can take those over tea and coffee over there. So let's give a big hand to Dr. Joshi and our discussants. Thank you very much. Thanks all for coming over here. Thank you.